Hello and welcome back to HateWatchers for another season of bashing the trash with the Rings of Power. Today we'll be breaking down and reviewing the first 3 episodes of Season 2, entitled Elven Kings Under the Sky, Where the Stars Are Strange, and The Eagle and the Scepter, respectively. Without further ado, let's get right into the breakdown, which means spoilers ahead. We kick off the season long in the past, with Sauron addressing the orcs and Adar, promising a dark new vision for Middle-earth, full of vibes and joy. After Sauron easily dispatches a would-be assassin, with the Secret Service not even feigning effort this time, he uses the orc's blood to style his hair. His worthiness to rule proven, Adar moves to crown Sauron as Dark Lord, but he really makes a mess of it, accidentally stabbing Sauron in the back, which prompts the orcs to go full Julius Caesar mode on him. Even though he's been turned into Sauron-flavored jelly, Adar kicks him just to be sure he's dead, which triggers a dying fart of nuclear proportions that brings about a new ice age. The orcs hail Adar as their new leader as the Sauron jelly seeps down into the earth below, which eventually consumes a rat and turns into this writhing mass that pulls itself out of the mire, just to head outside and hit the slopes. But the fun stops when Sauron is hit by a woman driver. The horse flees the scene because he was drinking, and Sauron consumes the woman and takes on his familiar Halbrand form. After trekking across Middle-earth, Halbrand comes across a group of people and asks this guy about his old wrinkly sack. Halbrand joins them on their ship, where the old man is getting the wrong idea about Halbrand's interest in his sack earlier, when a massive leviathan attacks the ship. He uses this opportunity to grab the guy's sack, but he's pulled underwater where the leviathan is about to eat him, but then it remembers that it's running late for its appearance on Shark Week. We then find Hal on a familiar-looking rickety raft, where he sees that his life is about to get a whole lot worse. Galloping to the present, we see Galadriel chasing down Elrond on horseback as she's reaching for his sack, and she's clearly still struggling to show emotions. She's taken by the guards and brought before High King Gil-galad and Elrond. King Gil asks her if it's true that she didn't mention that Halbrand was Sauron, and she spills the beans that he is in fact Sauron. Well, technically she says
Yes, Sauron.
And Gil-galad chooses an awkward moment to clear his throat. When Gil asks to see the rings, Elrond refuses, stating that they're corrupted, but Galadriel reassures him that the rings got nowhere near Sauron's dark, musky taint. It's all fun and games though until Elrond leaves the High King's high five hanging, and he demands the rings from Elrond. But Elrond is distracted, as he considers just jumping into the eternal abyss and ending his miserable existence as part of this show. And I gotta give him credit, he actually follows through with it. Over in Mordor, Halbrand has found himself on the whipping end of a new slave trade. One of the slaves is brought before Adar. He has one chance to make Adar laugh to gain his freedom. But when he starts with, "So a priest, a rabbi, and a donkey walk into a tavern," an orc gives him the wrap it up stab. When it's Halbrand's turn, he doesn't fare much better and is thrown into a cell. Far away, totally not Gandalf is having nightmares, but he experiences the true nightmare when he realizes he's actually stuck in the desert with Nori. To make matters worse, they're being spied on and they seem to be walking in circles. Elsewhere, Halbrand is dealing with an ornery cellmate when Waldreg comes in and chokes him. Kinky. He uses the leftovers to tempt the warg before whispering sweet blackspeak into its ears. Back near Lindon, Elrond has been reduced to a lowly bridge troll. Late at night, the legendary shipwright Círdan awakens to take a leak after sleeping as long as his 3,000-year-old bladder would let him, and he meets with Elrond and asks what's inside his hefty sack. Meanwhile, High King Gil-galad dispatches an elf to deliver a message to Celebrimbor that just says, "Halbrand equals Sauron, sad face." Galadriel still struggles to display emotions, but she at least knows where Elrond is hiding, of course. Elrond is explaining to Círdan that the rings must be destroyed. Círdan knows this would mean the end of the elves, and he mulls this over as he fondles Elrond's sack. But luckily the other elves arrive before it can go any further. Then Galadriel busts in, a walking reminder to Elrond why he drinks. They bicker over the rings, and Elrond questions the potential of darkness inside his friend Galadriel as she realizes Círdan has set sail to get rid of the rings. Back in Iraq, the stranger and Nori set up a trap for the person following them, but it turns out it's just Nori's weird friend Poopy. She helps them find their way, aided by the land literally having the letters rune etched into it, but their stalkers watch them still. At sea, Círdan prepares to drop the rings into the ocean deep, but Willie the friendly whale bumps the boat to prevent sea pollution, leaving Círdan to look upon the rings of power. Halbrand awakens to find Adar watching him sleep, and Adar tells him a bedtime story about how he believes Sauron is dead, but Halbrand tells him Sauron is so back, and makes an arrangement with Adar to be released to seek out Sauron on his behalf. But first he makes Halbrand listen to the earth, which apparently tells a pretty edgy joke. Halbrand's given a horse, and he enjoys a nice smirk while he listens to Waldreg's dying screams. Gil-galad sings while the elves gather under their dying tree, and I thought elves were supposed to be beautiful. Woof. The king talks about the end of their days when Círdan strolls in showing off his new bling. He produces 2 more rings, but the king spooks him and he drops them. As one falls to Galadriel, she takes this opportunity to propose to herself. Elrond tells her it doesn't work that way, but her strong and independent delusions win the day, and she says yes. To herself. Meanwhile, Gil-galad puts on the blue one and is like, yeah, this is definitely one of my top 4 rings. The sun shines upon this new era of elven materialism, and their tree flourishes with new life as Galadriel tries on a new emotion to fit the occasion. Elrond walks away full of judgment for her, but she's too busy playing a game with her new friends, where they try to get their fingers as close as possible without touching, and the sun shines down on the realm once more. In Eregion, the elven smith Celebrimbor is back in business when Galadriel 2.0 comes in to tell him his pal Hal is here to see him. He looks down at Halbrand as we get an allusion to Eregion being consumed by darkness, and the first episode comes to an end. We begin the second episode with a volcano erupting as it spreads its taint wide from Mordor to Khazad Dûm. In the Dwarven city, Lizzo is shopping for food. Surprise, surprise. And the ground rumbles as she struts forward, but her powers have doubled since we last met her, and a cave-in rocks the kingdom. We jump to Galadriel, who's doing some gardening, and she still thinks she's engaged to herself as she plans the wedding in her head. Celebrimbor visits out of nowhere, and the world goes dark as some hentai vines slither forth and trap him in some anime bondage before killing him, but it's just a vision. Back in reality, the king is concerned that Galadriel is taking this too far and telling her she can't just marry herself, but she changes the topic to discuss the dark visions she and the king have had. In Eregion, Galadriel, 1.5, tells Hal that he can't come in, but he says he'll just wait here before we cut to see that the king's messenger never reached Celebrimbor. Over in Rune, some priest ladies are forced to get rid of their moth collections at the behest of this new dark wizard. He swirls the moths who form into They-Them from Season 1, who delivers their report on Sauron. Not far away, the 2 Harfoots are passing the time by trying to give the stranger a name, but after hearing Tyrone, Terrell, and Lashquanda, he tires of this game. Down in Khazad Dûm, Princess Lizzo meets with the king and gets approval to belt out her new single.
Dancing like a sea hoe. Let's fuck it up. Where my girls at?
But the city itself rejects her music, and the king has some less than nice feedback for the Queen of Pop-Tarts. Then she and the king talk about his strained relationship with his son, and she tries to help by buttering him up real good like one of her pork chops. Meanwhile, Prince Doran is getting bullied by some AARP members after he proposed cutting back retirement benefits. He arrives early to dinner, fearing that his wife won't leave any food behind if he doesn't. She's clearly upset, and for once it isn't about food.
You think this is about food?
Galadriel visits Elrond, who is a day laborer now, and she invites him to her wedding, and he's like, there is no wedding, you're not engaged. And she's like, oh yeah? Then explain this! Outside, Círdan is wiping the whipped cream from the strip club off his face as Elrond entreats him for guidance. He puts his hand in the water, using the power of the ring to scare up some anchovies for his pizza, warning against the danger Sauron could pose with this kind of power. He could use this power to put pineapple on his pizza, casting Middle-earth into eternal darkness. Back in the desert, the stranger has fallen and he can't get up, and Poopy runs off toward a well of Mountain Dew, thinking that the mountain soda will revitalize him. They drag him to the well and pull up a bucket of the green elixir, racing to get as much Mountain Dew in him as they can before the raiders, now alerted by this ringing bell, show up. They do the do, and the stranger finds a stick that he uses to create a tornado. It dispatches the raiders, but also flings off Nori and Poopy, and the stranger loses his new stick. But he really likes all the suckage this tornado is doing.
I'm coming!
Elsewhere, Celebrimbor is showing his intern his newest invention, the iPad, when he asks about Halbrand, who's still lingering in the rain. He goes down to meet him, and Halbrand manipulates him into letting him inside for a bowl of goulash. Celebrimbor is overjoyed to hear that the rings have worked wonders and goes to open a bottle to celebrate, as he says. But then Halbrand asks if they're friends, and if he can confide in him. Celebrimbor thinks he reads the room correctly and saunters up and grabs Halbrand's chest, saying, "Yes, you can confide inside me." Hal quickly changes the subject and suggests that they forge more rings for men and dwarves, before revealing that he's actually a messenger of the Valar sent to help the elves, a point he proves by making a Batman exit. He reappears as Anatar, Lord of Gifts, and promises to make Celebrimbor the Lord of the Rings. King Gil tells Galadriel that he will be attending her sad wedding. Elrond walks in and she thinks he's attending too, only to find out that he's been appointed as her wedding planner, and she's real bitchy about it. In Khazad-dûm, Durin gets an invitation to the wedding as well, and episode 2 comes to an end. Episode 3 opens with the best actor from season 1, Isildur's horse Beric, reliving his show-stopping performance from the end of last season. He runs off to the burnt village in the Southlands where he gets surrounded by some hungry orcs, but he kills 2 of them. So not only is Beric the best actor from season 1, but he's now the best fighter in the realm. Beric heads into a cave and finds Isildur, who we can sadly no longer refer to as Wasildur. He's bound up in a spider's web, but he beats off an orc and frees himself before a spider pops the orc's head like a zit. The spider then attacks once again Ildur, but he escapes upon Beric. Elendil, back in Numenor, is stealing seashells from the king's tomb when Tits McGee comes in, sporting the hottest new look, Ozempic face. The blind Queen Miriel enters the room, and Elendil approaches her and whispers, "Is it nice to see me?" An aggrieved mother says, "Hey, you can't even look me in the eyes," and slaps the queen. Later, Pharazôn barges in on Queen Miriel, who tries to hide her stolen treasure, but Pharazôn isn't blind and he can see everything she's doing. He tries to help her pick out a gown for her coronation, offering her red or white and holding them up to her face, testing to see if she can feel the colors. Then Pharazôn and his cronies discuss supplanting the queen, which she'll never see coming. Ms. McGee tells the table about the Palantir she looked into as we see Miriel trying to do the same, but she's blind. An orc and his baby mama coddle and swaddle their orc baby as a giant troll strolls into their encampment and asks if Sauron can come out and play. Back in Eregion, Durin and Lizzo are meeting with Celebrimbor to discuss the Rings of Power. They just need to offer some mithril in exchange, but Durin is suspicious of Anatar, as he knows Elrond is way too abusive of their friendship to say the nice things Anatar says he said. After Anatar tells Celebrimbor that the High King forbade the making of any more rings, Celebrimbor sits down to write a strongly worded missive. Dear King Fuckface. Off in the Black Forest, Isildur gets stabbed in the leg by a fair lass named Estrid. She's remorseful, but she still wants her knife back. The two ride off to Pelargir in search of the Númenóreans and come across an old man who's got the shits. Isildur doesn't want to get too close, but he offers him an apple to plug up his problem. Then they get ambushed, but arrows start flying and Arondir is here to do CGI acrobatics and save the day. He's not super happy to see Isildur though and just wanders off. It turns out he was just eager to get to a funeral for his main squeeze Bronwyn, who left the show to fight for Iranian women's rights. Arondir goes to light the pyre, but Theo wasn't the biggest fan of his mom and he's got things to do, so he torches her and walks off to play Xbox. In Khazad-dûm, Durin finally confronts Durin, and the younger brings him the elves' proposal for the rings before he goes on to say that I'm just as hard and crusty as you, Dad, and I think this is far more information than we needed. Durin then says he doesn't trust this new power the elves are offering, but the dwarves are stuck between a rock and more rocks, and they're in need of some salvation. Back in Pelargir, Theo is acting out, telling Arondir that he's not his father, and that his real father didn't abandon him like his mom did by so selfishly dying, and he storms off, telling Arondir to leave him alone. In timeout, Theo then talks with Isildur and offers to take the Númenórean to get his horse back, when Theo has a break in his busy schedule. In the meantime, Isildur confides in Estrid that he was to blame for his mother's death when Theo interrupts him, saying that he got banned from Xbox Live for 24 hours, so now is a good time to go get Beric back. Isildur frees Beric as Theo distracts the evil men. They discover the ruse and are about to attack when the forest itself seems to swallow the men. Back in Numenor, the Queen emerges wearing white, and we still have 2 days before Labor Day, so it's okay. She heads to the throne, and someone makes a joke about the blind leading the blind, and she snaps back with a speech about seeing clearly the path forward, and the room erupts in laughter. Then Tits McGee interrupts and shows the people the Palantir the Queen has been using to guide their kingdom. The people want to destroy the Seeing Stone because clearly this queen has no use for it. Then chaos ensues. Elendil reaches for the queen, but predictably she grabs the wrong guy. The proceedings are interrupted by the arrival of a great eagle. The people see this as an omen and pronounce Pharazôn as their new ruler. He pulls out his sword and is like, hell yeah, now who's hungry for some giant turkey? We jump to Eregion where they're forging rings for the dwarves, and King Doran provides a little nugget of mithril. Halbrand does some cheap sleight of hand and drops a turd into the forge instead, and the episode comes to an end. Well, we've reached that point in the video where we have to decide if these first 3 episodes of Season 2 are great watches or hate watches. And I think I'd give the first episode a debate watch while the next 2 slid more into hate watch territory. Episode 1 definitely showed off the tonal shift the show has made, with the world and everything within it growing darker. The land has been cast into this autumnal state as the elven light has dwindled as the world heads towards a bleak winter. Everything about this second season has a darker tint to it, and I think it matches the events we're expecting to see pretty well. And the show still looks great for the most part, although that was never the problem with Season 1. It may be a turd, but it's probably the most polished turd we've seen on TV. And unlike The Acolyte, you can actually see where some of the insane budget went. Perhaps most importantly, the story is off and running right away. Whereas Season 1 took 5 episodes to set everything up and actually have characters start moving toward one another, Episode 1 seemed to already have better pacing. And it just makes it easier to get into the show when they're presenting this cohesive, overarching narrative centered on the creation of the Rings of Power, rather than having to spend half the season introducing us to everything. But then Episodes 2 and 3 slowed things back down, leaving us with quite a few boring stretches. And I found myself stretching for my phone a couple of times, which is never a good sign. So many scenes just drag on and on, leaving us with these long episodes that start to feel like a slog at times. Despite the better start Episode 1 had, it looks like the pacing may still be a problem in Season 2. And it also appears that we're going to have a similar problem with sprawling, disconnected storylines as we had in Season 1. Overall though, I think so far the season is an improvement upon that disastrous first season. That's not saying a lot, and the Rings of Power hasn't taken any giant leaps forward, but it's better nonetheless. Still not good though. And in that same vein, the show looks to be a bit less of a laugh-out-loud classic hate watch than it was in Season 1, which would be a bummer, because then we get even less out of a bad show. The funniest parts of Season 1 didn't happen until the back half of the season, however, so maybe they're just getting warmed up. Of course, the source of many of those laugh-out-loud moments, Galadriel, seems to be largely unchanged. She still gives off an air of being that same unlikable sociopathic protagonist who's unable to convey any human emotions other than restrained contempt. So she may yet be a source of entertainment for us in Season 2. Staying on the character front, I think the show benefits from being able to put more of a focus on Sauron and his machinations this season. It allows the show to take on the darker tones, and his story and his efforts to manipulate everyone in Middle-earth are just vastly more interesting than anything we got in the Galadriel-centric first season. And of course that means we're getting to see Annatar too, a pivotal role from the lore. Also, Círdan looks to be a positive addition to the cast, so I'd look forward to seeing more of him. Now, as I've said before, I'm no expert in Tolkien lore, so all you Tolkien lore buffs, let me know how this season's doing so far in the comments. Obviously, they haven't gone through and fixed all the problems and the open, glaring disregard for Tolkien's work from the first season, so we know those are still present. And this interesting business of the orcs having babies and wives and seeking some kind of peace is certainly a new take on the evil minions of darkness. However, it's hardly surprising for this show. But let us know any other new violations or contradictions of the lore this season has already made that you caught. There's a lot more we could talk about, but this video is already too long, and you can blame Amazon for dropping 3 episodes at once to manipulate the viewership numbers for that. Anyway, we hit the high notes, and I'm going to leave it here for this one. But remember, even if you don't watch it, HateWatchers will watch it so you don't have to. Are you watching this second season, or did Season 1 close the book on this show for you? If you watched these episodes, what did you think? Are you at least glad to see that Galadriel is still her old, unlikable self? Let us know in the comments. Also, don't forget to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to HateWatchers to stay up to date on this second season of the Rings of Power. Thank you for planning this sad, sad wedding with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.